All right, we are going live here. This is Anders Belanger, and this is my show, Engaging Personalities, where I bring on people who I think are engaging or are creating engagement, especially on customer-facing interactions. And today, I have a guest. I'm excited to have him on. He is half stand-up comic, half sales guy, all parental disappointment. He helps salespeople connect with customers through joke writing and understanding their customers' pain, and how creating humor can open up doors and open up ears of our prospects. So I want to bring on the show our guest today, Jon Selig. Jon, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. You nailed my my LinkedIn tagline. You nailed my business and what I do, and that's a rare thing sometimes.
Okay, well, good. I mean, like, you had it written up there, so I stole it and then, did my thing. But I have I relate to you because we both have a background in entertainment. Me doing magic, you doing comedy. And also I feel like we're kind of fighting the same fight in some ways of trying to create engagement and capture prospects' attention, right? Like that piece, because I feel, and I think this is a great place to start, Jon, we're in the attention economy, except it feels like no one's paying attention. You know what I mean? So is that something that you find, that it's harder to capture prospects' attention these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the proliferation of venture-funded tech startups who all need to scale on a certain timeline, which means they have to go out and hire God knows how many XDRs and AEs, all of whom sort of have to reach out to prospects. And there's no time to train. There's no time to get everyone ramped properly and really understanding who our buyers are. There's just been a lot of cold outreach that's really falls flat, that goes nowhere, that ends up getting deleted in inboxes. There's been a lack of, there's been some reluctance last few years to cold call. And at the same time, there's just been this overemphasis on metrics that are needed to be hit, sometimes overlooking the fact that maybe less is more, and a quantity over quality approach has been employed. And as a result, prospects tune out sales reps because there's just so much noise going on that it's harder than ever to capture their attention.
Yeah. So, and like you were saying, that the rush to scale sometimes it's not doing anyone any favors, because they're having to push almost bad content forward, right? And they need to rethink and really approach their customers in a new and better way. And that's what you're helping companies do, if I understand. So just before we get into how you do that, let me just ask you, your background is a stand-up comedian. How long were you doing that, and how long were you doing sales? Like, how did those two kind of come together?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a good question. I was in sales way before I ever took the stage in stand-up comedy. I sold software and professional services, mainly Oracle stuff, some SaaS as well, in the travel space. And I just kind of hit this wall with the career where I'm like, is this really what I want to be doing the rest of my life? Talking to CIOs about how they're extracting, transforming, and loading data from financial databases and transforming them into reporting. I just hit this wall where I was like, I don't know if this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And while not having a clue of what I wanted to do, I just started doing stand-up. And right out of the gate, I saw all these parallels between trying to get the attention of an audience that doesn't want to be there because they're at an open mic. Maybe they're supporting a friend, or maybe the show has been thrust upon them as they were having a conversation with their friend. And also the parallels of trying to get the attention of 5 or 6 senior leadership team members in a boardroom who also don't want to be there because I'm like the third vendor that they're considering. So I just saw these parallels with folded arms, looks on faces that weren't exactly welcoming. And I realized, oh my God, I have short windows to get both these groups to buy into me and pay attention to me. And so right at the gate, I just saw that sales is stand up, without the 2-drink minimum, basically, or that stand up is sales, but with a much crappier comp plan. There's all these parallels between the two. And I performed stand-up, if you count the pandemic year, which I sort of do because I did a lot of Zoom comedy, for about 10 years now.
Wow. Well, it makes sense, Jon, that you did sales first to be able to see the matchup, because, and I think that's, a lot of the why you are respected by other salespeople too, right? Because you have that background, and you're not coming in from the entertainment side, like I am originally. But I see a lot of the same parallels too, because my job at trade shows when I worked for different clients was to stop people at a trade show booth, right? And so had to kind of interrupt that pattern, get people to buy in on what I was doing so that they would listen to the marketing message and eventually discover that the company can help them, right? And then cross-sell their time and attention into the booth for a demo or set up next steps and that sort of thing. So very similar things. So Jon, tell me, like, grabbing your prospect's attention and kind of understanding the pain of the customer. How do you go about doing that? Because I can see, let's say a VP of sales or something going, "We're going to do what?" You know what I mean? We're gonna write jokes, or like. So can you walk us through? How do you go about helping someone? Let's say I'm some sort of a inside sales rep making phone calls, and what would you kind of do to help me in terms of getting there? Can you just kind of walk us through what that process looks a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I was selling technology, I was trained lead with pain. So you're calling a CFO, and let's say you help them with something really fun and sexy like budgeting. And maybe, I used to sell budgeting and planning software. And the pain was that CFOs, yeah, exactly. It's hot stuff. And look, some people really like this stuff. It wasn't for me entirely, but hey, we all got to eat and pay rent and that kind of stuff. So I was doing it for a while. And the pain that planning and budgeting software solves is the headache and nightmare of doing your budget in a spreadsheet and it being passed around from employee to employee and lots of manual errors. So, classic way that I was trained was to call up a CFO and like, hey, we speak with lots of CFOs. They're all struggling with doing their budgeting and planning in spreadsheets, which leads to manual errors. Is this a problem for you? Versus, hey, I sell Hyperion. It's a planning and budgeting tool that helps help streamline the process. So you're making about the pain versus what the product is. So that's step one. Step two is, can we tell a story about why that pain sucks? And do it in a way that's 6 to 12 seconds long and that paints a picture through humor of what could go wrong if they don't solve a problem. So for example, I was working with Canon, global, their managed services team. And companies outsource all their print to Canon, anything to do with print. So devices, paper, toner replenishment, security on the network, software updates. They don't want to deal with print at all. Print is like the ugly redhead stepchild of a CIO or a COO's world. Neither of them want to deal with it. So the joke that these guys wrote is, that closet full of toner might be good inventory management or a sign of a hoarding disorder. Right. So what you're doing is you're kind of like taking the pain and you're painting it out a little bit more. There was another one I just did. It was for a security company. I don't have the joke in front of me, but you want to make sure your network has less downtime than a disgraced CEO after a security breach. Right. Yeah. That's kind of, and it's got a nice little pointedness to it too with that one, because that is the outcome, or the nasty outcome of not dealing with that situation. Yeah, I try not to get them to paint too nasty an outcome, like you'll go out of business, or you'll even this one. You can't go dark, right? Because you're going to destroy the rapport that you're trying to build with that opening line of sorts, right? Well, I preach that actually. I preach two things. I say I've taken two key expressions. Number one is the definition of insanity is repeating yourself over and over, never making any adjustments and expecting the same results. And the other one is comedy equals tragedy plus time. And in business, there's that repetition of making the same mistakes over and over and over, and no one fixing it. And then there's tragedy in business, right? Like, because things are going wrong and people are getting frustrated. So I like to say that in comedy, tragedy is the insanity that comedy equals tragedy that repeats itself without any resolution, without making any changes. And the idea is that if you can trigger a prospect about something that's been going wrong in their company over and over, through humor, they're going to laugh and go, "That's funny because it's true. We've been struggling with that for so long. Like, can we talk? Maybe you can help me get my boss to sign off on something that can fix this problem."
And the other thing that you're saying, like tragedy plus time being comedy, and there's an old book I read by John Voorhouse. Do you know what book I'm talking about?
I don't.
Okay, it was kind of like I think the comedy Bible is someone else, but it was something like that, and it was Truth and Pain is comedy, you know, and which is very similar, way of doing that. So calling out something how it is, and people go, "Yeah, you're right," and they admit to it. I find sometimes it's hard, and I think this might help. When you sometimes have to call someone's baby ugly, like we really got to point out the problem. Does that help soften that kind of idea? Because that's kind of a tricky area to sometimes, go into someone's pain and rub their nose in it. You know what I mean?
Well, software sales is fixing problems with business process most of the time. If something's broken, it streamlines a process, it makes it more efficient. And I don't think anyone takes a business process too personally. I think if you go in and say, go to a marketing leader and say, "Hey, your entire marketing process is awful," yeah, they might take some offense to that. But if you can highlight some things that you can help them fix for them and improve and make it more efficient, you should have their ear. Touching back on something you said, I mean, good comedians are always triggering our buyers from an emotional perspective. Our audiences, not our buyers. Although they are our buyers, they pay for tickets. Sometimes not much money. Sometimes they get free tickets. But at the end of the day, comedians are able to relate to their audience members, to their emotions. So things that they hate, things that frustrate them, and things they fear. They talk about those three things far more than things they love or they want or they need. And we can do the same thing with buyers. We can trigger their emotions around things that they're struggling with.
That's one of the principles we actually teach at Engagify, is somehow invoke or evoke emotions in whoever your audience is. And I mean, comedy, we don't want to make people cry, really, in a sales perspective, so making someone laugh seems like, a logical choice in terms of not easy picking, but low-hanging fruit in some sense, to kind of build rapport. We talked about, just briefly, we're talking about capturing people's attention. What is it about comedy that does capture people's attention? What do you think? What do you think it is?
I just want to, separate the word comedy from the word joke, and that's okay. This is all common. It's You're not the first, and you won't be the last. And let's identify what I mean by the word joke. I don't mean three members of various religious groups walk into a bar and say offensive things to one another in a long-winded story. To me, a joke is classic setup punchline. It could even be a one-liner. So a joke should be a sentence that provides some information and some context to the listener. Some expectations are built in the listener's mind, and a punchline comes along and subverts those expectations. It's a surprise. They didn't see it coming, and that's what creates the laugh. Sort of like a magic trick. It's like, "Oh, how did you do that?" And so to answer your question, a good joke should be like no more than 6 to 12 seconds. And if we think about our buyers, we need to feed them relevance in the setup, because within the first 6 seconds, if they see no relevance, whether it be in an email opener or say a cold call opener, if we're not feeding them something that's about them and their challenges and their needs, within those first six seconds, they're gone. And if we can do that within the first 6 seconds, and they're going to give us another 6 seconds, if we can surprise and delight them and paint a picture of something to watch out for and get that emotional reaction to them, they will give us even more of their time.
Yes. And it's such a breath of fresh air, I imagine, from all the other calls that they're getting, that it's kind of like, can you, recently, Jon, you shared something on LinkedIn, kind of an opening line to introduce yourself. Could you share that with us?
Yeah.
You know which one I'm talking about? Okay. So I don't want to wreck it by talking about which one it is, but yeah. And then just because I commented on that when you threw that up, and I was like, oh, I can see if you had called me, how different that is. So lay that on us, if you will.
Yeah, and just a little context in case anybody isn't making too many dials. I mean, there's so many bad cold calling scripts. There's some that are meant to get a laugh, that are just acknowledging that this is a cold call. And mine is like that too. The only difference, and I feel an opening cold call script should demonstrate the reason for your call or build your credibility. And so a lot of cold call scripts that maybe get a laugh, they do get the door open, but they're still at ground zero from a credibility perspective. So like maybe you've earned a little bit of time to tell the buyer about why you called, because you made a joke acknowledging this is a cold call. In my case, my goal is to do two things. It's to get the door open, but it's also to demonstrate my credibility as a guy who offers comedy writing for sales teams, trainings, and workshops. So my go-to opener, and it's built my business, is, hey, Anders, this is Jon Selig. We've never spoken before. So this call will be a lot like a craft beer, unique, refreshing, and ice cold. See, there you go.
I love the fact that I couldn't remember all of it from LinkedIn. So I still had like a chuckle from it because of the surprise that the ice. It was like, oh, ice cold, yes, because this is a cold. Like, so I really like how I think Judy Carter calls it calling the moment, or calling out the moment, right? Yeah. And that's what those people would do, saying, hey, this is a cold call kind of thing. But because of, well, first of all, how well crafted that is, I think people, that also builds authority with you as well, right? You're just like, when I talk with someone who's in sales and I feel like I'm in the hands of someone who's very confident and competent, I kind of go, all right, let's see what you got. You know what I mean? Like I give you more leeway when you're kind of in the hands of a master kind of thing, right? And I feel like that's what that does. Can we talk a little bit, Jon, about, I think like the confidence and the delivery of the jokes that are written, right? Because I've been to my share of open mic nights too. And when you watch someone come on and just the way that they kind of, come up to the mic and they don't look too sure of themselves, you're just like, oh no. And then there's someone who walks up on the mic, they haven't even opened their mouth yet. And you're like, take me away. Like, just take, you got me. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. I don't know if you've been noticing, but I've been posting on LinkedIn stuff that sales pros can learn from truly terrible open mic comedians who never get booked for a proper gig. And I learned a lot from stand-up using my sales background when I started, just watching some of my fellow newbies. And I was noticing that some people never connect with crowds. Confidence, like you just brought up, is one of those things. Confidence usually comes from repetition and practice, but it's also, it is practice at the end of the day. Like, I knew that there was no way that I could have any confidence on stage if I didn't get the muscle memory going around some of these jokes. And even then, we're still horribly unconfident. But you're right. I've watched some people who actually ended up doing okay in comedy. There's one guy in particular, I found he lacked confidence. He wasn't authoritative with the crowd. And I said to him one day, you have really good material, but you just need to pull your shoulders back and puff your chest out a little bit, hold the mic a little more confidently. Yeah. And people will then buy into you before they even buy into the material. And ultimately you want them to buy into the material. You want them to buy into both, but because they're a package at that point. And I've watched people with no material and a lot of confidence get some laughs for a little bit.
Yeah. I have a friend who was like, that was one of the things that he could tell a funny story, right? Like it wasn't really, the jokes weren't written as tight as other comedians, but sometimes it's just like and the instant likability goes a long way too, like you're saying. But at a certain point, like even Seinfeld, in what was the movie called there that yeah. So, but where he goes out with not a lot of great material, testing new material, and everyone gives him polite Seinfeld applause because he's Seinfeld. And then after a while, you realize, oh, this isn't funny. Like there was that respect time because of who they were. But you're right. In the end, it has to be written well, right? Like you can't just get by on personality alone.
And so something that I always lean on is if you are an unknown comedian, in other words, if Seinfeld comes out on stage, people know who Jerry Seinfeld is. They've watched his show. They've loved his comedy. He can tell a 2-minute story without a punchline and people will be listening because he's Jerry Seinfeld. But when Jon Selig comes on stage, as hilarious as I am, no one knows who I am. That's so many people in comedy, and so many of us have that overconfidence as well. But when I come out on stage to an audience I don't know, I try to tell them 3 short, quick jokes, mainly about myself or about the context, to kind of get them on my side, to win them over, to not meander, to not go too long. Just make them laugh 3 times in succession within like a minute and a half. Because that way I get them on my side. I've demonstrated my credibility. I have their trust. And at that point, I sort of extend out what I'm trying to say, and I could wait a little longer between a setup and a punchline moving forward. But you're only as good as your last joke. So if you bomb a joke, let's say you hit on those first 3, but then you go a little longer and the punchline fails. Okay, you've burned some of your emotional capital with the audience, I guess you could say. And if you bomb again, then their faces are going to light up, but not because they're having a great time. It's because they're on their phones. Like we can see when they're on their phones. On the stage. That blue light just eats at our soul, one ray of light at a time. Yeah.
But I think what you said though too was so important is that the 3 on the front end, like that authority, that buy-in, it has to be right at the beginning. Like you're selling the time going into the call, whether we're talking cold calling or whether we're talking the actual comedy performance, the stand-up performance, is that because I've done it for years. My rule had always been, even when I was a kid doing magic, that first trick, I got to do the dead easiest. I cannot screw it up because then I can relax and, get into the, presentation and everyone can come along with me. Right. But if it's if you don't nail that first piece, then you're toast kind of thing. Right. You're like dead on arrival.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I've watched some open micers come out on stage and they say, hey, everybody, I want to tell you a story. And it's a long-winded story and there's a punchline at the end and they don't know how to tell the joke. So by the time they hit the punchline, like no one's paying attention. Like literally everyone's on their phones and it's the sea of blue in the club. And the community feels horrible. Their confidence is further destroyed. But that's just part of the learning process.
So now the truth and the pain and the understanding the prospect's pain as you help salespeople create these opening lines, do you go further into the call too? Like how much joke writing do you suggest? Is it mostly for that grab their attention piece, or you know what I mean? Like how far do you go with it?
So jokes or humor serve different purposes for different roles in sales. So if we look at what I call the big 3, we got the SDR or the BDR trying to drum up meetings for an AE. AEs have longer discussions. They need to be listening more than anything and maybe highlighting certain points along the journey. And then there's customer success who's onboarding a new client. I mean, this is just tech sales. This isn't necessarily all sales, obviously. But, if you're a BDR, your job is to use humor or your job is to get attention. And I say humor is a great way to do that within the first 6 to 12 seconds of an interaction. If you're an AE and your job is to understand the buyer's challenges in greater depth, you don't need to be funny right out of the gate. They're on the call. They're there because they want to talk. That said, there's this debate going on in sales lately. Sales prospects don't need to like salespeople; they need to trust them. Fair. But when was the last time that we trusted someone we really couldn't stand? Right? That we were having unpleasant experiences with. So the jokes that come out of my workshop do two things. They kind of lend to those openers, but the journey to the jokes is really where the value is. And I like to help them create jokes that paint pictures of what could go wrong if they don't solve the problem. But to do that, you need to map out everything that could go wrong if you don't solve a problem. And that bolsters sales reps' knowledge and insight and understanding, and help them become more subject matter experty and become a little bit more fluent in conversation, because I'm trying to help them break away from buzzwords and just say things in simple English. So the process of writing jokes helps AEs quite a bit. And if they have one that they can use to lean on to make a powerful point during a discussion to reel their attention, their buyer's attention span back in, that makes them more powerful. Not just the jokes, but all that inventory of raw materials they've gathered. The process of writing the jokes is meant to strengthen their subject matter expertise so they can have easier conversations.
I like how the joke writing is kind of like the carrot to kind of like, hey, we're gonna have some fun, let's do this, and people can get on board with that. And then the byproduct being they really get to know their customer, right? Like it's kind of like you've almost in the process tricked them into really exploring where those people are at.
You're ruining my Jedi mind tricks that I pull on sales leaders. They're like, wow, this is great. He's going to turn our sales reps into comedians. Something. No, I'm just going to make them a little bit more knowledgeable and conversational. But you're absolutely right. It's basically my tagline on my website. It's not such a secret. Is I reverse engineer understanding and insight of your buyers and the problems you solve by getting sales reps to write jokes. It's fun. Now you did touch on something else too, John, that I want to talk about, and it was getting away from buzzwords. Like and again, working with companies and training their salespeople to be more engaging. I'm always trying to get them to simplify, right, and to engageify is what we say. But all the buzzwords and all that like curse of knowledge and all those things that go into that, it's to me. People don't, even if they're in that industry, they don't relate to those terms as much. And I think when you write a joke, it has to be so economical with the words that it forces you to kind of get real about it. Is that the case, or can you speak to that kind of simplification a little more? Well, there's some words that lead to good jokes, and there's others that don't. I mean, obviously, the more technical and not nuance, but technical and specific a word is, kind of the less chance you have of using in a joke. Like, let's face it, when do humans use the words optimize and maximize in our day-to-day language? We don't. You could use them in a joke. There's ways. But in short, if you can take really specific buzzwords and break them down into simple English, you're sort of expanding your palette of paints that you can use to paint that picture you're looking for, and there's more ways to get there. When the language is super specific, things become very limited.
Right. Okay. So, is there a process that you use? I mean, it's a whole workshop. It sounds like, right? Like it's not simple kind of steps. But if there was, SDR or ISR, BDR watching, and they wanted to kind of like think about this, do you have a kind of some pointers to help them just to kind of develop this? Other than, reach out to you, I guess, if there's sales leaders out there at jonselig.com. But what here? Oh, I even have I think I even have your site here like this. Oh, there. Oh, no, that's not the one I want. I want it like this. But anyways, yeah, pain to punchline to pipeline is what.
Oh, you've gone quiet. If folks out there can hear me, we're experiencing minor technical difficulties. Anders can hear me. And I'll just, maybe I could.
Yeah, there we go. I'm back. Thank you. You saved me. You saved me. There you go. All right, awesome. So what I was going to say was, so they can go to the website. If you're a sales leader and you want to like dig into, your prospect's pain, definitely check out John's website. But I was going to say, John, just can you is there kind of like a few pointers for like salespeople out there making cold calls? Is there something simple that you could give them as a pointer?
I think the first step is just know who your audience is, what matters to them, and your relevance to them. Without those three things, you cannot properly write a good joke for your buyers. Joke writing is this whole thing that it's hard to just give a point on a live stream, but you can't write good jokes without good baseline material, like without good baseline insight into a particular topic or subject or who it's for. Mm-hmm. So you have to nail those things before you can even think about writing jokes.
Yeah. And I think when I was on your website, that relevance piece, and I believe you have like a section in your website that says, so what, who cares? Which really, I guess that's the question, to see if you're relevant. Are those the kind of two questions that you should ask yourself?
Well, that's it. It's like I look at so many websites. We're an AI-driven engagement platform that 10x is scalability. It's like, what does that even mean? Why does that matter to me? How does that change my life? Like, this is just you slapping together a bunch of buzzwords and pounding your chest a little bit. And I'm kind of picking on a certain category. But there's just so many, like, we've won these many awards. Like, okay, so what?
Yeah. Good for you.
Why should I care? Like, how are you going to help my life? How are you going to help me? Yeah. What's in it for me? All these classic questions that I didn't invent, including so what, who cares? I did not come up with that. But it's the thing that stuck with me the most from my sales training. When we're saying something to a buyer, it's like, okay, why are we saying this and why should they care?
Yeah. And that's one of the things we train at Engagify too, is we have an acronym that's called SAVE YOU. And if you're ever losing engagement, you use the acronym to save you, to save yourself. Yeah. And the you is you focused, right? It's got to be about them. Otherwise, they don't care. Whether if it's something bad for them, they're going to listen because they're like, whoa, I don't want to, have that thing happen, or something that they want in terms of kind of carrot and stick. So,
and just something that I talk about when I again talk about what can sales pros learn from truly terrible stand-up comedians. I've watched a couple comedians over the years get on stage in front of a group of paying people and say, "Hey, who here is a big fan of pro wrestling?" And no one applauds. And he goes, "Oh, that's too bad because I'm going to do these next 5 minutes anyway." Well, that's not really a good use of your audience's time or your stage time. Like, you're making it all about you at that point. And if you can't make them laugh because they don't know what you're talking about, then why should they ever follow you on social media or come to see you perform?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That reminds me of a comedian told me one time, never ask an audience a question you don't want to hear the answer to, right? Don't set yourself up for failure like that instead. Well, that's very cool. Hey, Jon, I think we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank you once again for coming on. Again, your website, which way? Is it this way? Yes, there's his website. Look at that. I can almost get it in there. Go there. If you are a sales leader wanting to train your people to understand your customer and get them to book more meetings, right? Grab more attention and connect with those prospects. That's the way to do it. So thanks for your time, Jon. I appreciate it. Any final word to you? Anything?
Yeah, go out there and just start to better understand your buyers and try and loosen up a little bit, everybody. Your buyers don't always love their jobs. If you can make them laugh and be relevant to them all in one fell swoop, you'll have a much better chance of connecting, starting a conversation, and keeping your day job.
Perfect. All right. Thanks again, Jon.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
Engage Life.